a lot of people say, I don't have enough time for this. But we do. Especially if you break things down to small steps, especially if you break it down to a question. What will be my next small step on this? And it's a really valid part of the creative process to simply ask, how can I make this easier for myself?
Okay, so we're recording. Hi Jill, thank you so much, Jill Badonsky, the one and only. Thank you so much for doing this, being interviewed by me. You were such a hero of mine, honestly. I am a certified Kaizen-Muse Creativity Coach. You are my trainer, you are the founder, the facilitator of Kaizen-Muse Creativity Coaching, and many more things. So you have literally changed my life, and I am so happy and grateful that you will do this for me. So
honored to be here. I'm so excited to be here too.
Will you tell us about the Kaizen-Muse training, what the Muses stands for, and how you came about actually thinking of this particular type of creativity coaching?
Okay, well, it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it pretty quick. And I started out as an occupational therapist in psychiatry, and I've always been fascinated by the creative process. So I was doing research back in the long time ago for the creative process, and just the books back there, and there wasn't a lot of books back there. I remember reading Rollo May, and I was also reading books on projective drawings, which I brought into my occupational therapist, and just the fascination of how we project our personality and our needs and our conflict into our art. And then I got to see how creativity heals kids and adolescents, how when they're unable to express themselves verbally, they were able to express themselves through art, and how art gave them a sense of control and a place that they could go to when everything else was falling apart in their world. So that hooked me even more. And as I started getting promotions in my master's degree, I went into the corporate world and used my creativity to be successful in the corporate world, and totally burned out because it wasn't me at all. And then just started inventing things. I invented groups. Well, I taught the artist way for a while. And then I started doing workshops in creativity. And when I did workshops, some people would ask, would you coach me? Which I had no idea what that meant. But when I started coaching them and using the things that I was figuring out, I just kind of had an out-of-body experience and just thought, oh my God, this is where I want to be. And I tried to write my own book on creativity and ran into my own blocks. So I went to a life coach to help me with that, and got blocked further because of the linear nature of that particular life coach. And I'm not saying all life coaches are like that, but I just could not conform to go from A to B to C, and why don't you just do this, and all these lists and surveys. And I asked myself, how many people are getting blocked by, conventional kind of coaching, and decided, because I was going through these blocks, figuring out how I got through them and teaching that, and just making it fun, and looking at my own process and writing my first book. And my first book was, as you mentioned, about the Muses. And the Muses are they're really voices inside of us that help us be creative. We have the voices that don't help us be creative, like, I'm not good at this, everybody else is good, somebody else has done this, I'm too old. And if we listen to those voices, we're not going to do our creativity. So there's these other voices, and these Muses plug into those. It's like, pay attention to what you're doing right, think differently, have fun with it, be courageous. So the Muses are responsible for these voices, and the more you bring them into your life, the more creative you're able to be in terms of getting through. Everybody's creative, but we have all of these blockades. We have all of these fears and expectations and comparisons. And as soon as we figure out how to get out of those, then we're able to apply our creativity to our our lives, our art, our writing, our relationships, our wellness, and we start to become artists of being alive. So we go about our lives creatively. So I think that answered your question.
It did. I have actually, I just want to show here, I've got the book that Jill is talking about. I don't know if you can see this, one of them. I've got, as you can see, it's full of things here. The 9 modern day muses and the bodyguard, and that's one of the ones that we use in the training. Then I've got the Your Maniac. I don't know if you can, that shows up. Really big as well, full of creative inspiration, and love this one too. I love all of the Muses in. There you go. So yeah, and they're all well filled with things here. So there's
well, that does my heart good to see that.
oh yeah, and full of creative inspiration. I always go back to them all the time. They are really, really good. So you do the coaching, you do the coaching training, and you also coach people yourself still. Do you? You do the training is still twice a year, and you do?
Yes.
Yeah. So will you tell us how much you do? You do the training, you do retreats, you do coaching, you do improv, you do beautiful and really funny illustrations, and paintings. Am I missing something? Am I leaving something out?
I do performance poetry, and I do, what else do I do? Yeah, I wrote a play. I did a full length, one woman show, and I'm kind of I'm just obsessed with the creative process. So however it comes out, then I follow it where it wants to go.
And is there now with all these things you do you have because I'm somebody who gets, and this I learned through your training. I had no idea I was a raving perfectionist. I didn't even know what that was. I thought it was something to do with wearing makeup and being or having a fancy home, which I don't. So I figured that wasn't me. But how wrong I was, and also easily overwhelmed, and so which is linked, I know, from your training too. So with all those things, do you have like a specific system? Do you have like days where you do, I'm doing this now, or how does that work for you? How do you not get overwhelmed yourself by all the different creative outlets that you have?
If I'm not careful, I do get overwhelmed.
Okay.
I think it's just normal in the creative process to get overwhelmed. But as you know, I figured out little antidotes for all of these things. And I think one of the reasons we get overwhelmed, and it's kind of an epidemic these days, because there is so much, there's more than there ever has been in terms of what we can do and what we see, is to lower expectations. Because when we're thinking, I need to do this, we're in this irrational place of thinking we can do all of these things, and we can do a lot, but we can't do it all at once. We can't. So we go back to our breathing. We can't breathe in and out several breaths at a time. So that's what the Kaizen part of Kaizen-Muse is to get ridiculously small. And as you know, even these days when we ask people to break things down to small steps, they're still too big.
Yeah, true.
In terms of, we want them to make it so easy it's hard not to do.
Yeah.
So, and I need to remind myself, because that's another thing that we've learned, is that we figure out these tools and then we quickly forget, because our habits insidiously sneak back in. And so I have to constantly go, okay, how can I break this down? And so small, talking about like asking a question is the first step. Okay. Not even, I'm going to sit down for an hour and write. I'm just going to ask a question about my creativity. It's fooling that part of us that is going, you got to do this, you got to do this. Mm-hmm. We're going to do, okay, all I have to do is sit down and write for 5 minutes something really crappy. And so the fun part of ourselves, the creative part, the kid wants, I can do that. That would be fun to write something crappy, because it's not fun to sit down for an hour and write the best thing you can ever write. It just puts a lot of pressure on you, and that leads to procrastination, and then everything piles up, and it's this this wonderful cycle that is, and then we beat ourselves up, and that doesn't help either. So all of these things are connected, and as you begin to unravel one part of it, we calm down. The part of us that is pushing us begins to help us, because we found something that's kind and small and creates momentum. And I think, that's the thing, is getting caught up in that wonderful flow of creativity, that, even that you sit down and go 5 minutes, I'm just going to do 5 minutes, I'm going to write. And then a half an hour later, you realize time has stopped in terms of your creativity. It's gone on for everybody else. But we've gotten into this beautiful, timeless, ageless flow where we're lost, and we're just, in another world. And we just want to sneak and have little tricks to get us there, because once we're there, it just begins to happen on its own, and we know where to go, and our intuition leads us until another fear comes up or resistance, and then we go back to another trick. So I also have to make lists, and I think this is important for those people who are overwhelmed, is to, where we go when we're overwhelmed is, this is what I still haven't done, this is what I still need to do. We don't give ourselves credit for what we have done. And to stop for a moment and go, okay, this is the project I'm working on. What have I gotten done on it? What have I done so far? And then we create this foundation of, look what I've already done. And we push off of that rather than pushing off of, what do I still need to do, which is hard to push off of, for sure.
And it's true. And I think what's so genius about this way as well is that once you get the method of breaking things down really small, you can apply it to all areas of your life. And it's, whether it's doing dishes or doing laundry, doing chores, whatever way, once it gets under your skin, as you said, you can just apply it to any project or anything, that creative work that you have to do. How did you come across Robert Mauer, the Kaizen? Did you know him first, or did you learn about Kaizen and then you found him, or how did that come about to be part of the training?
When I wrote my first book, I had the muse Marge in it, and she's the muse of, okay, now let's get started. And she was all about breaking things down to small steps. And when my clients read his Kaizen book, One Small Step Can Change Your Life, the Kaizen Way, and recommended it to me, and then I heard it recommended by, it just seemed this synchronistic flurry of recommendations for that book. So I read a little bit about it online, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is Marge. But it's explained from the brain's point of view. It's the amygdala, and how the amygdala is responsible for fear. But if you break it down to a small step, it's not there anymore. So your cortex can come in. So I emailed him, and I said, you need to work with me. And he's just this really nice guy. And I went up and visited him in Santa Monica, and he was on board to teach this. So he's part of the curriculum. He's still part of the curriculum after 15 years.
Wow.
And still available for people, still really dynamic classes that just blow you away every time, because he's got so many different examples of how this works and what you can do to bring more creativity in your life that works, from the psychological point of view, for sure.
It's very interesting. I wrote to him once I just qualified about a question for work, how to use something for parents of the children, and he was so kind and wrote back several times, and he is just a really kind man. And it's also really good to get the biological facts sort of thing of how fear works, because it makes really a lot of sense then to break things down, because it's not just an idea, it's not just this is how the brain works, and that's why it's so efficient, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stood out for me the most about his work is, a lot of people go, how am I going to get far with small steps? And we cannot create a new habit by doing something an hour at a time. You know, when people start to write or start to want to do something new, they think, okay, I'm going to do this an hour 3 times a week or this. And the brain has all of these other habits, the habit of procrastination or social media or Netflix. So it's not going to change a habit unless it's broken down to 1 minute at a time, 5 minutes at a time. So it can be repeated and a pathway can be made so it's easier to show up. So I think that's a big one for people to understand why small steps are so effective, for sure.
Yeah, I've also had, when people have a little resistance to small steps, I've also, sort of like, I remember you also taught us in the training is that, if big steps work for you, fine, that's great. But small step is there as an alternative to when you do get blocked. And I think that made someone, the more recent one went, okay, I get it now, because she thought she always had, but how am I going to get ahead if I don't, what I mean? So it's I guess a mixture of both really, but yeah, definitely breaking things down into this small step, and the whole Kaizen philosophy of thinking, small questions, small rewards. It's just so liberating. Is the word, and so freeing.
And I think you're right in terms of being able to apply it to every area of your life. I just need to ask one question to this person. I just need to make one phone call. Going into the kitchen when it's a mess. I just need to fix one dish here. And then it just breaks the resistance and we continue. It doesn't stay small. It just is a way to get started, which is sometimes the hardest part, for sure. Yeah.
So, do you have, in all the work that you do yourself, do you have a specific creative block that sort of pops up for you again and again?
Well, I pretty much have all of them. And they're all my friends now. We have dinner together and stuff. But the reason I know them so well and know what works with them so well is I do experience quite a few of them. And I think I'm also a raving perfectionist in recovery. And as you know, sometimes you go into the program thinking, yeah, my house is a mess, I couldn't be a perfectionist. But when we get into the creative process, there's that constant, I'm not good enough, and the comparison and the fear and the control. And I really have to remind myself to, again, lower my expectations and that I'm expecting too much out of myself. And the distraction thing, I think, is really big right now. It's my latest area of research because people are so addicted to social media and Netflix and all of these little escape mechanisms, and they're really kind of eroding the creative process because they're interrupting all the time that we need for daydreaming and for just allowing our concentration to go deep. For we're writing something, then we check Facebook or our email, we are actually kind of interrupting our cognition that's responsible for our creativity. So, and again, I'm studying myself and seeing what works for myself because I've gotten into that habit. And so that's a big one in terms of changing habits, creating a structured situation where people are holding the space for each other in order to stay focused and develop the habit of focus. So those are big ones for me, for sure.
And through the coaching that you do, or you many years of coaching, and is there a creative block that you see that is most common? Is that lack of focus now, or has it changed actually over the years? Is it overwhelm or now lack of focus, or?
I think it's pretty much stayed the same, but there's different manifestations of it. I think fear is a big part of it. I'm not going to do good enough. People are going to think this is crazy. I'm afraid other people have already done this. And that in combination with the expectations, putting pressure on ourselves that it has to look a certain way and that we can't tolerate our own ineptness at the beginning of a process. There's a number of them, those lead to procrastination. I think procrastination is the big one because people put pressure on them, because they fear something. They would rather put it off for a while, do something else. So the procrastination, not showing up for yourself, not making time. A lot of people say, I don't have enough time for this. But we do. Especially if you break things down to small steps, especially if you break it down to a question, what will be my next small step on this? And it's a really valid part of the creative process to simply ask, how can I make this easier for myself? What would be interesting for me to write next? Because we usually don't go there. We go to, I'm not writing, I'm procrastinating. And we're just kind of strengthening the things that are getting in our way. And the time thing becomes sort of a crutch. I don't have time is easier to say than when I show up, it's hard. And I'm worried I'm not perfect. So it's easy to go, oh, I need to spend time over here with my family or my job. And those are real things, but there are little periods of time that we can carve out and just set our space up 4 or 5 minutes. And the next time, just allow ourselves just to scribble or to write something that's on our mind, just to break through the resistance that comes up because that fear. And to know also that fear is a really normal part of the creative process. That, yeah, you might not be making time and you might not be you might be procrastinating. And it's because you're up against one of the most common parts of the creative process, and that's fear. And it might be there the entire time, but if you just keep going, you can make something anyway. You can create anyway, just using those anchors. So what? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm feeling fear. I'm too old. Other people are doing it. So what? And when that becomes the habit, fear begins to simmer down a little bit. For sure.
Yeah, I also loved how you made us do that in the training. We had to create an anchor for ourselves, and I just, we have a little book. You get a book where you look, where you have all these things that will make you sort of go, okay, this is my fuel, my creative fuel. When you need to have a look at something, and I still look at it, still have it. It's still, all my many files of notes and stuff, and it's just that's why I wanted to do this interview with you, because I just think it's so important, and it gets more important. And I think, actually, remember we were talking about Kaizen Kids, and do you want to tell us about that?
Kaizen Kids?
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing that's sort of in the making right now. We have a couple of people interested in bringing all of this to kids, which is really important. So we have the web page. We're changing the Muses so they appeal to kids a little bit more, because we're finding it's so important to get kids at that age where they don't slip into this horrible perfectionism and comparison. So we're working on it. It's kind of taken a back burner to some of these other things, but definitely want to get to it. And some of the people who are going into master coaching are looking at it for adolescents and starting to apply all of this to journaling with adolescents. And what you're talking about is the reminder journal, and having something we write down that helps us rewire the brain to start thinking, instead of I'm not good enough, to maybe I'm not good enough yet, instead of this dead end, which is I'm not good enough, and creating a possibility with just adding the word yet. So one of our masters is beginning to create a journaling program for adolescents, and that's where that's at. Yeah.
I have a little story. I went. I have as of right now, I have a 16-year-old teenage son, and he's into music, making music. And he's doing beats and stuff. And he came to me the other day, and he goes, "Mom, listen to this." And he was, so listening. It was great. Then he says to me, "I'm such a perfectionist," like proudly. This is like, oh, I want to get it perfect because I'm such a perfectionist. And Mom here goes, that's not very good. That's not a very good thing. This is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's super important for teenagers and young people to be because still, you know, a lot of people, like my son, even though I'm his mum, he still thinks, you know, being a perfectionist is a good thing. It's a, you know, it's the healthy striving to do the best you can. Whereas, I think the perfectionism, I think he meant really was, you know, it has to get it right, otherwise it won't do, you know. And I thought, okay, you know, at least
have you taught him close enough yet?
I've been preaching this for years.
Because it's a good
But
mantra. Yeah, it's just to go close enough, and it may be hard for somebody to understand that. But when you are a perfectionist, close enough is usually above average.
Yeah.
It's usually really, really good, but the perception is it's not perfect, so it's not right. Yeah. So yeah, he's so lucky to have you with what
thank you. He goes to me and says, "Are you coaching me now, Mum?" Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple of more questions, Jill, if that's okay. One of them is, how do you keep yourself motivated or stay motivated?
That's an interesting question, because I don't feel like motivation is necessary. I feel like this is a compulsion. In fact, you know, I was thinking the other day, I'm kind of getting to the age where I can relax a little bit more, and I can't even imagine what that would look like, because I absolutely love doing this, and I think that's an important thing for everybody, is to, rather than, you know, how do I motivate myself, is to focus on what do you love about this? What do you love about the way colors go on the page, the way the words come together, the way, you know, you're planting something and it looks just right. To be able to focus on what you love draws you to it, which is better than trying to motivate yourself to do something. So just kind of daydreaming about the process draws me to it, I think. It just feels like this is what I'm supposed to do. There isn't much I'd rather do. When I'm at a party or sometimes at a social event, I just want to come home and start doing my creativity again. So I think I'm lucky in that way. I think there's a lot of creative people like that too. And if you're not, you know, ask yourself what you love to do. Because if, you know, one of the things we find in coaching is a lot of people do things because other people are doing them, or they think they should do them. And sometimes we really free people up by going, do you really need to do that? So just making sure that you're doing it for the right reason. And sometimes when that happens, there's no motivation needed. It's just, you can't wait to do it again. You're just like, you're drawn towards it.
I think also one of the reasons why you inspire me so much, obviously I follow you on the Facebook and the social media, and you're so funny. I mean, there's a playfulness to your communication and to the way you express yourself. That, you know, there's your photographs and your captions and stuff, and it stays in that sort of playful mindset, which reminds me, who has a tendency to get very serious, to go lighten up, and which is so lovely.
Oh, thanks. And I think it's important. You know, we have this whole Muse, be silly, about lightening up, because you can't play and be a perfectionist at the same time. So it really kind of pushes that aside. And the question, how can I make this more fun, has really, like, people who do take it too seriously lighten up and are able to relax. And when we relax, we're just more creative. And for me, I could not have written my 3 books without making it fun. And as soon as I think that goes back to the motivation question too. As soon as it doesn't become fun, I ask myself, you know, what do I need to do here to make it more fun? When I'm writing something, it just becomes too serious, I go back and add some smart ass something to it, and something irreverent or something playful, and then it's more fun for me and I want to write more.
Yeah. So. Genius. Do you have any last questions? Do you have any projects or anything that you've got something in the pipeline or anything?
I'm working on the 4th book. The 4th book is about getting people back to the daydreaming, back to going inside for inspiration. And it's kind of a cross between mindfulness and creativity. It's taking, I think you heard of Uber Bliss. I'm taking, it's a journey. It's a journey through all the steps of coming to the present moment, alive and creative. So that's the book I'm working on, as well as still running retreats in Taos, New Mexico for people to come to and to experience all of this and the beauty of Taos and the mountains and good things to eat. So those are things.
They look amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I will link all your websites, obviously, all the places that we can get in touch with you. And I've sent a few people your way. I sometimes get questions about, creativity coaching, and the one and only, send it your way. It's just, it is the best training ever.
Oh, thanks.